Hi, this is Coley, the MomInShaman from beautiful Four Oaks, North Carolina, and I am reading chapters 2, or stories 2 and 3, stories 3 and 4 of My Father's Dragon. This is a story by Ruth, Stiles, Gannett, a Newbery Honor book. This is a chapter book. The Trumpet Club Special Edition. So we're on chapter 3. My father finds the island. My father hid in the hold for 6 days and nights. Twice he was nearly caught when the ship stopped to take on more cargo. But at last he heard a sailor say that the next port would be Cranberry and that they would be unloading the wheat there. My father knew that the sailors would send him home if they caught him. So he looked in his knapsack and took out a rubber band and the empty grain bag with the label saying Cranberry. At the last moment, my father got inside the bag, knapsack and all, folded the top of the bag inside, and put the rubber band around the top. He didn't look just exactly like the other bags, but it was the best that he could do. Soon the sailors came to unload. They lowered a big net into the hold and began moving the bags of wheat. Suddenly one sailor yelled, "Great Scott! This is the queerest bag of wheat I've ever seen. It's all lumpy like, but the label says it's to go to Cranberry." The other sailors looked at the bag too, and my father, who was in the bag of course, tried even harder to look like a bag of wheat. Then another sailor felt the bag, and he just happened to get hold of my father's elbow. "I think I know what it is," he said. "This is a bag of dried corn on the cob." And he dumped my father into the big net along with the bags of wheat. This all happened in the late afternoon, so late the merchant in Cranberry who had ordered the wheat didn't count his bags until the next morning. He was a very punctual man and never late for dinner. The soldiers told the captain, and the captain wrote down on a piece of paper that they had delivered 160 bags of wheat and 1 bag of dried corn on the cob. They left the piece of paper for the merchant and sailed away that evening. My father heard that the merchant spent the whole next day counting and recounting the bags and feeling each and every one trying to find the bag of dried corn on the cob. He never found it because as soon as it was dark, my father climbed out of the bag, folded it up, and put it back in his knapsack. He walked on the shore to a nice shady place and lay down to sleep. My father was very hungry when he woke up the next morning. Just as he was looking to see if he had anything left to eat, something hit him on the head. It was a tangerine. He had been sleeping right under a tree full of big fat tangerines. And then he remembered that this was the island of Tangeria. Tangerine trees grew wild everywhere. My father picked as many as he had room for, which was 31, and started off to find Wild Island. He walked and walked and walked along the shore, looking for the rocks that joined the 2 islands. He walked all day, and once when he met the fisherman and asked him about Wheat Island, the fisherman began to shake and couldn't talk for a long while. It scared him that much just thinking about it. Finally he said, "Many people have tried to explore Wild Island, but not one has come back alive. We think they were eaten by the wild animals." This didn't bother my father. He kept walking and slept on the beach again that night. It was beautifully clear that next day. and way down the shore my father could see a long line of rocks leading out into the ocean. And way, way out at the end, he could just see a tiny patch of green. He quickly ate 7 tangerines and started down the beach. It was almost dark when he came to the rocks, but there, way out in the ocean, was the patch of green. He sat down and rested a while, remembering that the cat had said, "If you can, go out to the island at night, because then the wild animals won't see you coming along the rocks, and you can hide when you get there." So my father picked 7 more tangerines, put on his black rubber boots, and waited for dark. It was a very black night, and my father could hardly see the rocks ahead of him. Sometimes they were quite high, and sometimes the waves almost covered them, and they were slippery and hard to walk on. Sometimes the rocks were far apart, and my father had to get a running start to leap from one to the next. After a while, he began to hear a rumbling noise. It grew louder and louder as he got nearer to the island. At last it seemed as if he was right on top of the noise, and he was. He had jumped from a rock onto the back of a small whale who was fast asleep and cuddling up between 2 rocks. The whale was snoring and making more noise than a steam shovel. So it never heard my father say, "Oh, I didn't know that was you." And it never knew my father had jumped on its back by mistake. For 7 hours, my father climbed and slipped and leapt from rock to rock. But while it was still dark, he finally reached the very last rock and slipped off onto Wild Island. So that was chapter 3. We're getting ready to start chapter 4. There aren't any pictures in this book. What pictures there are, I'll show you. But it's going to be really exciting. So yeah, again, this is my father's dragon. And then the next chapter, I'll just do one more. The next chapter is My Father Finds the River. Oh. Oh. All right. The jungle began just beyond a narrow strip of beach. Thick, dark, damp, scary jungle. My father hardly knew where to go, so he crawled under a woohoo bush to think, and ate 8 tangerines. The first thing to do, he decided, was to find the river, because the dragon was tied somewhere along its bank. Then he thought, if the river flows into the ocean, I ought to be able to find it quite easily if I just walk along the beach for far enough. So my father walked until the sun rose, and he was quite far from the ocean rocks. It was dangerous to stay near them because they might be guarded in the daytime. He found a clump of tall grass and sat down. Then he took off his rubber boots and ate 3 more tangerines. He could have eaten 12, but he hadn't seen any tangerines on this island, so he could not risk running out of something to eat. My father slept all that day and only woke up late in the afternoon when he heard a funny little voice saying, "Queer, queer, what a dear little duck. Dear, what a queer little rock." My father saw a tiny paw rubbing itself on his knapsack. He lay very still on the and the mouse, for it was a mouse, hurried away, muttering to itself, I must I must tell somebody. My father waited a few minutes and then started down the beach because it was almost dark now, and he was afraid the mouse really would tell somebody. He walked all night, and two scary things happened. First, he just had to sneeze. So he did, and somebody close by said, Is that you, monkey? My father said, Yes. Then the voice said, You must have something on your back, monkey. And my father said, Yes, because he did. He had his knapsack on his back. What do you have on your back, monkey? Asked the voice. My father didn't know what to say, because what would a monkey have on its back? What would a monkey have on its back? And how would it sound telling someone about it if it did have something? Just telling another voice said, I bet you're taking your sick grandmother to the doctor's. My father said yes and hurried on. Quite by accident, he found out later that he had been talking to a pair of tortoises. The second thing that happened was that he nearly walked right between two wild boars who were talking in slow, solemn whispers. When he first saw the dark shapes, he thought they were boulders. Just in time, he heard one of them say, There are 3 signs of a recent invasion. First, fresh tangerine peels were found under the woohoo bush near the ocean rocks. Second, a mouse reported an extraordinary rock some distance from ocean rocks, which upon further investigation simply wasn't there. However, more fresh tangerine peels were found in the same spot, which is a third sign of invasion. Since tangerines do not grow on our island, somebody must have brought them across the ocean rocks from the other island, which may or may not have something to do with the appearance and or disappearance of the extraordinary rock reported by the mouse. Whew. Alright, it's almost over. So this is the picture of the 2 tortoises. Let me show you that. Okay. Alright. After a long silence, the other boar said, You know, I think we're taking all this too seriously. These peels probably floated over there all by themselves. And you know how unreliable mice are. Besides, if there had been an invasion, I would have seen it. Perhaps you're right, said the first boar. Shall we retire? Whereupon they both tumbled back into the jungle. Well, that taught my father a lesson, and after that he saved all his tangerine peels. He walked all night and toward morning came to the river. Then his troubles really began. So that was the end of chapter 4. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there for this because it's about 15 minutes. That's good story time. And this is My Father's Dragon. We read stories number 3, My Father Finds the Island, and 4, My Father Finds the River. So next up we'll have stories 5 and 6, which are My Father Meets Some Tigers and My Father Meets a Rhinoceros. Woo! Alright, so thank you so much, my star babies, for joining story time. I hope that you enjoyed it. Now, sleep tight, be good, listen to your mom, listen to your dad. Okay? You are amazing, you are creative, you are wonderful, and I love you so much. Mwah. I'll talk to you later. Bye.